Hello, in this tutorial I'm going to show you how to make something like this. A big meteor hitting the ground and causing a lot of commotion and debris and explosion. And believe it or not, this doesn't use a simulation. I don't know about you, but I find working with simulations very hard. Especially when I've got a tight schedule and a bunch of shots to make. So let's get right into it. Start with a plane and scale it right up. My ground was about 600 meters by 600 meters. Create a cube, give it a subdivision surface, set it to 2 and apply it. This gives us a geosphere. They are generally better for working on compared to UV spheres. This will be our meteor, so scale it right up as well. And move it up somewhere over here. Let's animate them hitting into each other. Create an empty and move it to the same position as the meteor. Now parent the meteor to this empty. Create another empty and parent our original empty to that newly created empty. Why do this? Because we can use the top as an offset, rotate it down. Now with our child empty, our y-axis stays relative, so we only need to animate one value. Generally just a little bit tidier. I set a keyframe at 0. And then one at 25 for it to hit the ground. Now with anything big and massive like this, it wouldn't immediately stop. So I had it continuing going, but significantly slower, just so it eases into this impact. Then make it look like a meteor somehow. In this example, I sculpted it, but you could also use a custom shader with displacement. Both options are in the Blender file available to download with a link in the description. Also, if this tutorial ends up being a bit too fast for you, there is a much slower, less edited version there too. Okay, now here is the trick to make this blast wave. Make another cube. Scale it right up, add another subdivision surface, set it to 2 and apply it, giving ourselves another geosphere. In edit mode, scale it down on the z-axis like this. Now we want to go to our shape keys, add a basis shape key. Let's create a new shape key and give it a smart name. Here I called it full boom. Then make sure you have that shape key selected and that you can view it in edit mode. With proportional editing turned on, just move the vertices out and scale them out such that it looks like a blast wave. Now, changing the value of our full boom shape key makes this blast wave grow out. So we can just animate this. So all we need to do is set a keyframe for when we want it to start, set full boom to 0, and then when we want it to be all the way out, set full boom to 1. And we can just keyframe it underneath the ground and scale it down out of the way until we need it. For the explosion shader, add in some noise, give it some texture coordinates, create another empty into the scene, give it a smart name, something like control explosion noise, then add that as the texture coordinate and change the mapping to object. Now translating this empty controls the noise, which is cool. I played around with the noise settings to something like this, which felt a bit better. Add in a color ramp to get some more contrast. And then here's the key. We want to get a displacement node, take the result of our noise, put it into height, and in the material settings, make sure that you change the displacement settings to displacement only. Add on a subdivision surface to our blast object. We're going to need a lot of polygons to displace with. Now we play with the displacement scale here. We can see how this is affecting our blast object. But of course, this wouldn't be a solid object, so add in a principal volume. Make another ramp. Set this one to B-spline for better fall-off ramps. Give it a bit of contrast. And pump the result of this into the black body intensity. Change the temperature to 4000 Kelvin. Modify the color ramp to look like this, which gives the result looking like this, whereby it looks like it's kind of hot in the center and then it's going up out into darker clouds. Of course, you can play around with this and get something that you like. I added a bit more roughness and detail to the noise texture here. So your final shader should look something like this. If you're finding this tutorial useful, please consider subscribing. It signals to me that people are actually watching these and enjoying them, which will make me far more likely to do more of this. If we go to our compositor, I'm going to add in glare, change this from streaks to bloom, and in the highlights take threshold just so it's kind of where the heat is. To see the result of the compositor, make sure that on the render view dropdown, you have it set to always. Now, depending on your GPU, all of this can take up quite a bit of processing power. So a fun little trick, if you change the render engine to Eevee and create a temporary BSDF in our explosion shader, change the base color to something dark like clouds, and then take our noise and pump it into the emission strength and change the color to something like our heat and use that as the output, then it means in Eevee we can, in real time, get a feeling for what all of this looks like. To make these clouds more dynamic, what we can do is animate our control explosion noise moving up through space over time, which will make all of our clouds move a little bit. Now here's a little trick that I did. I animated a multiply node to multiply the black body intensity and make it start very intense, and then just animated that value down over time, so it looked like it was kind of cooling down. But there was still a bunch of contrast there, so you can add a map range node and change the to minimum to something above 0. So just animate it so that at the start it's something slightly above 0 0, and then a few frames later, as long as we want this flash to be, add a keyframe and put it back to 0. And essentially all we're doing there is telling the shader to map those darker values to be higher, which removes the cloudy contrast, so at the start, it looks like a bright full flash. To make the meteor look like it's heating up, let's make another empty, scale it up, and move it over here. Let's give it a proper name, something like control fall off. In the meteor shader, add a texture coordinate node, choose that new fall off as the object, then using a distance node and pumping our object into there, add a ramp and have a look at the result, and inverting it so it's something like this, that I can control a fall off mask and animate the position and size of this fall off to make heat grow over time. To give it a bit more randomness, I just added in some noise. Take the result of this, pump it into your emission strength to make sure all of this heat matches. Add in a black body node and change it to 40,000 Kelvin and pump that into the color. Now all the color temperatures match, so it looks like it's the same heat levels. So the final node network for that emission effect should look something like this. Now to animate it, all we need to do is translate the fall off. I simply used auto key, set a keyframe at the end where it's grown to its full size, and at the start, making it smaller and moving it into place so that when I play it, it grows. Cool. Finally, we need some particles to get that debris kind of feeling. Now we want to make little rocky particles. So add a cube, press M, then add it to a new collection, give it a smart name, something like particle instances, put on a subdivision surface, set it to 2, apply it. To be lazy, use the same shader as our meteor, make a new copy of it though, and change the scale of the texture. We can get rid of all the nodes relating to the fall off and instead add in a new ramp, give it a bit of contrast, modify your noise texture so it looks something like this. We want this to be into our emission strength. Add in a math node and change it to power. So if we give our ramp a bit more contrast here and then use the power node, we can now control the emission over time. Add them glowing red hot at the start and then slowly cool down over time. So just set a keyframe at the start of the blast and a keyframe at the end of the blast. We don't want all of our rocky particles to be a perfect sphere, so duplicate them, and with proportional editing, just move around the vertices a little bit and make them not symmetrical. That is the key. Once we've got a bunch of variations, now if we think about it, if something slams into something like this, particles would sort of fly off in this direction. So we're going to need an emitter with faces pointing in that direction. To do that, just get a UV sphere, scale it roughly into shape, delete all the polygons facing in directions that we don't need. Now if you notice in my final version here, I used the initial hot blast wave to hide these particles spawning into existence. So scale the emitter roughly into shape of the initial blast wave. With this emitter object, let's add on a particle system. Now we want to spawn particles at the initial hit. So for me, that was frame 38. Then I allowed 2 frames for spawning particles. So I set the frame start to 38 and the end at 40. Just choose here whatever looks right for your scene. Make sure your lifetime is longer than your scene so they don't just randomly disappear. Now the key part here, down in velocity, we want to add a bunch of velocity off the normal. That's going to be the direction of the faces. The speed of this is going to depend on the scale of your scene, but for my very large scene, 200 meters per second worked. Notice that this all feels a little bit blocky. That's because they're all sticking to the normal direction. So to improve it, let's add a subdivision surface and set it to 2. But the main thing is that we want to go down to object velocity and bump up the randomize to something like 25. Go down to render, and instead of rendering as a halo, change it to collection. Then simply put in your particle instances collection here. Nice. And just so we can see what these look like at the moment, we want to make them big. One thing we want to add is rotation. So if we tick rotation here, make sure dynamic is turned on and that we have these settings. Set the phase to 1 and we'll randomize it by 2. You press play, they are now slowly spinning. So maybe we want to go a bit faster. So I might go for 5. Scale these back down, so I want these initial ones to be very small. Cool. Now here's the thing, it's a lot easier to throw a grape than a bowling ball in terms of physics. So why do I say that? This event would have a fixed amount of force, and smaller pieces, it would be much easier for them to have higher velocity. So in our effect here, I add many small particles going fast, then gradually ramp down the speed on different particle systems while making them larger and less numerous. So to do that, we're going to rename these particle settings to 200 meters per second. And we've got our particle system up here that I'm going to call particle system 200. Make a new particle system, and the particle settings for this, change them back to 200 meters per second. Make sure that you make a copy of it, clicking this button here, and this one, call 150 meters per second. Okay, and this particle system, I'm going to call particle system 150. And on this one, as you might guess, we're going to change the speed of this normal velocity to 150 meters per second. And we're going to scale them slightly up. So you can see that this is the second wave, and I'm going to do this 2 more times. Gradually take the speed down on each of them, and as you're taking the speed down on these other ones, make them bigger and less frequent by making the emission number lower. So I actually ended up with these settings for my 4 particle systems. Depending on the scale of your scene, don't be afraid to change some of the settings here, especially the velocity and the size of the particles. We have a bunch of particles going underneath the ground, so all we need to do, with the ground selected here, go to the physics tab and turn on collision. The thickness outer, let's change it to 0.01, will mean that they will bounce. So you can see this one, they're bouncing off the ground. Ultimately, that's it. Now maybe add a spaceship into your scene and make it be chased. That looks cool. And once again, if you find this useful, please do consider subscribing and liking. It does help a lot. Thank you. Bye-bye.